I buried my wife on a Tuesday. I remember that because the calendar in the kitchen still had Tuesday circled in red ink, the day she was supposed to go in for her second ultrasound. We never made it to the appointment. The world ended somewhere between the parking lot of the grocery store and the drive home. And by the time I understood what was happening, Elena was already coughing into her sleeve and pretending it was nothing. I dug the hole behind the tool shed because the ground there was soft from the old vegetable garden she'd given up on 2 summers ago. The shovel kept hitting roots. My hands kept slipping. I don't remember crying. I remember being annoyed that the shovel handle had a splinter, and being annoyed felt safer than the other thing waiting underneath. Her name was Elena Vasquez Hale. She was 31. She liked cold coffee and warm socks and arguing about movies she'd already decided she loved. She married me 4 years ago in a courthouse because we couldn't afford anything else, and she said she didn't care. She just wanted the paperwork to match the way she already felt. I'm telling you these things because I need someone to know them. I need someone to know she existed before the radio, before the voice, before what I did after. The first one came through the back fence while I was tamping down the dirt. I heard it before I saw it. A wet sound, like someone trying to breathe through a mouthful of pennies. I turned around with the shovel still in my hands, and there it was, halfway over the chain link. One arm hooked at a wrong angle. Eyes the color of old milk. It didn't look like a monster. It looked like a man who had forgotten how to be a man. He was wearing a postal uniform. I think his name tag said Dennis. I didn't read it carefully. I swung the shovel. I don't want to describe what that sounded like. I will say only that the second swing was easier than the first, and the third easier than the second. And that is the part I am still trying to understand about myself. When it was done, I stood over Elena's grave with a stranger's blood on my forearms, and I said her name out loud, just once, to test whether the words still belonged to me. It did. It still does. That's part of the problem. The house was quiet in the way houses get quiet when the refrigerator stops humming. The power had gone 3 days earlier. I'd been running the radio off batteries, scanning, listening to the slow narrowing of voices on the emergency band until there were almost none left. A man in Albuquerque telling people to stay indoors. A woman who might have been military reading coordinates that didn't match any map I had. Then static. Then more static. I went inside because I didn't know what else to do. I washed my hands in the bathroom using bottled water and watched the pink swirl down a drain that wouldn't drain anymore. In the mirror, I looked like someone I used to know slightly. Brown hair too long, beard I hadn't meant to grow, eyes that had seen the inside of a grave and were trying to pretend they hadn't. I made coffee on the camp stove. I poured 2 cups out of habit, and then I sat at the kitchen table and drank both of them because there was no one to be embarrassed in front of. Outside, somewhere down the street, a car alarm started and started again, like it was trying to remember how alarms were supposed to work. That was the first day. I want to say it was the worst day, but the worst day was still ahead of me, and it was wearing my wife's voice. The neighborhood was called Ridgewood Estates, which made it sound grander than it was. 40 houses on a loop, a community pool that had been closed for 2 summers because of a crack nobody wanted to pay to fix, and a sign at the entrance with a fake gold seal. Elena and I bought the smallest house on the cul-de-sac because it was what we could afford, and because she liked the dogwood in the front yard. The dogwood was still there. Most of the neighbors were not. By the second day after I buried her, I had started a list. I wrote it in pencil in the back of a paperback because pencil felt less permanent than a pen. The list was titled, "Still Here." There were 4 names on it. Marcus Bell, who lived 3 doors down and used to fix my lawnmower for free. His daughter, Imani, who was 8 and had a gap in her front teeth she was proud of. Then a man named Caleb, who I knew only because he'd moved in a month before everything started. A thin, nervous guy who worked nights at a hospital and slept with his curtains drawn. And me, Henry Hale, 34 years old, widower of 2 days. I didn't put Elena on the list. I almost did. My hand started to write the E, and I stopped because if I wrote it, I would have to scratch it out, and I couldn't make myself scratch out her name. Marcus came over that afternoon. He knocked the way he always had, 3 slow taps, and then a 4th, which used to be a joke between us about the rhythm of a song neither of us could remember the name of. I let him in. He was carrying a rifle I didn't know he owned, and a can of peaches. "You buried her," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd seen me digging. "Yes. Imani saw too. I told her you were planting something." "Thank you." He set the peaches on the counter like he was paying admission. Marcus was a big man, 50-something, retired from the city water department, with hands that always looked like they'd just finished doing something useful. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen him look before, even at his wife's funeral the year before last. "Caleb's gone strange," he said. "I don't mean infected, I mean strange. He's been on his roof. Says he can hear them better up there." "Hear what?" "The dead, or the radios." I couldn't tell which one he meant. I thought about telling him about the postal worker behind the fence and decided not to. There would be time for that later. Or there wouldn't, and it wouldn't matter. "We should pool food," I said. "Yours, mine, whatever Caleb has if he'll share. There's a generator in my garage, but no gas. The pharmacy at the corner might still have insulin and antibiotics if no one's been through it. Imani's allergic to penicillin." "Okay, we'll remember that." He nodded. He looked at the table where I'd been drinking 2 cups of coffee for a wife who wasn't there, and he didn't say anything about it, which was a kindness I'm still grateful for. Before he left, he stopped at the door and turned around. "Henry, I have to ask, did she turn?" I'd been waiting for someone to ask. I had been waiting for it the way you wait for a bill you know is coming. "No," I said. "She didn't turn. She died first. I made sure." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded again, slower this time, and walked back to his house with the rifle held loose at his side, like a man who had decided something but wasn't going to say what. That night, I dreamed about Elena's hands. Not her face, just her hands, peeling an orange at the kitchen counter, the rind coming off in one long spiral. When I woke up, the spiral was still in my head, and the radio in the living room was on, even though I was sure I had turned it off. I don't keep guns. Elena didn't like them. After her brother died in Phoenix, she made me promise. And I kept the promise because promises were the only currency we had that the world couldn't devalue. So when Marcus offered me one of his on the 3rd day, I almost said no out of habit. Then I looked at the shovel in the corner of the kitchen, still flecked with what I hadn't been able to wash off, and I took the pistol he held out. It was a 9mm, scratched along the slide. He showed me how to load it, how to clear it, how to hold it without locking my elbows. I had fired a gun exactly once in my life, at a bachelor party in Reno. And I had hated it. This time I didn't hate it. I didn't feel anything about it, which was maybe worse. We agreed on a rotation. One of us on watch from Marcus's upstairs window, which had the best view of the entrance to the loop. 6 hours on, 12 off. Caleb, when we finally pried him down from his roof, agreed to take the dawn shift because he said he didn't sleep anyway, He had dark circles under his eyes that looked painted on. He carried a small handheld radio everywhere. A cheap thing with a telescoping antenna and a cracked screen. And he kept it on low, even when nothing was coming through but hiss. "Why do you keep it on?" Imani asked him. She was sitting on Marcus's porch eating a granola bar in tiny, careful bites, making it last. "Because somebody might say something," Caleb said. "And if I'm not listening when they do, then they said it for nothing." She thought about that. She was a serious child, even before the world stopped being kind to children. What if it's a bad person who talks? Then I'll know there's a bad person. She nodded and went back to her granola bar. Marcus watched the exchange from the doorway with an expression I couldn't read. Later, when Caleb had gone home and Imani was inside drawing on the back of a real estate flyer, Marcus pulled me aside. "He's listening for someone specific," he said. "He hasn't told us who, but he's listening for someone. His wife." "He didn't have one," I asked. I let it go. We all had our reasons for staying alive, and his were his. That night was my first watch shift. I sat at Marcus's upstairs window with a pistol on the sill and a thermos of water and a notebook Elena had bought me for my last birthday. A leather thing she'd had embossed with my initials because she said grown men should have nice things and refused to use them. I wrote in it for the first time. I wrote, "Day 3. Elena is in the ground. I am above it. I don't know yet which one of us is worse off." Then I crossed it out because it was too clever, and clever felt obscene now. Around 2 in the morning I saw them. A small group, maybe 5, walking down the middle of the road past the entrance sign. They moved with that uneven, cooperative drift the dead had, like a flock of birds that had forgotten the rules of flocking. One of them was a woman in a hospital gown. Another was a teenager with a backpack still on. They didn't turn into our loop. They kept going. But I watched them until they were out of sight, and I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. They were heading somewhere. Not wandering, heading. West, toward the river. Toward the part of town where the radio tower used to broadcast the morning country station Elena hated, and I had pretended to hate with her. They were going somewhere on purpose, and I didn't know what that meant yet. But I knew it meant something, because nothing the dead did was supposed to be on purpose. I wrote that down too. Then I sat in the dark and listened to Marcus's house breathe around me. And I thought about Elena's grave behind my own house 2 doors away. And I tried not to imagine the dirt moving. The radio came alive on the 5th day. I was at Caleb's house. We had decided, the 3 of us, that we would consolidate during daylight hours. That splitting up only made sense after dark, when one of us was on watch and the others were sleeping. Caleb's house had the best windows, narrow and high, hard to break through. It also had his collection. I hadn't known he was a collector until I walked into his back bedroom and saw the shelves. Shortwave receivers, CB units, a ham rig with a license framed above it, cables coiled like sleeping snakes. "You said you worked at the hospital," I said. "I did. I'm a respiratory therapist. The radios are just a thing." "Just a thing?" He shrugged. He was a small man, narrow-shouldered, with that hospital shift pallor that doesn't come off even in summer. "My dad was a trucker. He talked to me on the CB when I was a kid, when he was on the road. I think I'm just trying to keep him company." "Is he?" "He died in 2019. Before any of this. I know he's not on the other end. I just like the noise. I let that be true for him. We needed people to have reasons. Marcus had brought Imani over because he didn't want her alone, and she was sitting on Caleb's living room floor with a plastic horse and a plastic cow. making them have what sounded like a very dignified conversation about pasture rights. Marcus was in the kitchen rationing out canned beans into 4 bowls, because 4 was the number we had now. And we didn't talk about how 4 was a smaller number than we wanted. The voice came through the small handheld, the one Caleb carried everywhere. He had set it on the kitchen counter while he scanned through the larger rig in the back. The handheld was tuned to a band he said no one used, an old VHF business frequency that had been abandoned years ago. He kept it there because, he said, sometimes ghosts liked empty rooms. The voice said my name. Henry. Just that, once. Soft. With a slight rasp Elena had always had after she'd been crying. I was holding a spoon. I remember the spoon because I dropped it, and the sound it made hitting the linoleum was louder than anything had been in days. Marcus turned around. Caleb came running from the back room. Imani looked up from her horses. The voice came again, clearer this time, like the signal had found us. Henry, if you can hear me, please answer. It was her. It was her voice. I knew the shape of it the way you know the shape of your own hand in the dark. I knew the way she said my name with the H slightly soft, a habit from the Spanish her grandmother had spoken to her as a child. I knew the catch in her throat that meant she had been holding back tears for longer than she wanted to admit. Marcus said something. I didn't hear it. Caleb was already at the counter, grabbing the handheld, his eyes wide. Don't answer, he said. Henry, don't answer yet. That's my wife. I know what you think it is. That's my wife. I buried her, and that is her voice. He held the radio away from me. His hand was shaking. Henry, listen to me. Listen. People do things on the radio. Bad people. They record voices. They lure people. There is no protocol left. There is no FCC. There are people out there who will say anything to get you to come outside. How would they have her voice? He didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. The radio crackled. Elena said, I don't know where I am. I think I'm in a hospital. Henry, please, I'm so cold. And I sat down on Caleb's kitchen floor next to the dropped spoon because my legs had decided for me, and I put my face in my hands. And Imani, 8 years old, came over from her horses and patted my shoulder very gently, the way you pat something that might break. We argued for 2 hours. Marcus wanted to ignore it. He said the simplest explanation was almost always the right one. And the simplest explanation was that someone with a recorder and a transmitter had been working the bands looking for survivors to draw out. He said in Bosnia in the 90s, during the siege, there had been people who used loudspeakers to imitate the voices of relatives at night, to break the morale of defenders. He said cruelty was older than electricity. Caleb wanted to listen. Just listen. He said if it was a trap, we'd hear the seams eventually, and if it wasn't, we'd hear something useful. He said the worst thing we could do was talk back before we knew what we were talking to. I wanted to go. I wanted to walk out of Caleb's house and down the street and through whatever was waiting between me and the hospital she'd mentioned. Because there was only one hospital in the county, and I knew exactly how to get there. And even if there was a 1 in 100 chance, even 1 in 1,000, that what I had buried was not what I thought I had buried, I stopped that thought. I stopped it because I had to. I made sure, I said out loud, to no one and to all of us. Before I buried her, I made sure. Marcus looked at the floor. Caleb looked at the radio. How sure? Caleb said. Not as a challenge, as a real question. I thought about it. I thought about the bedroom, the fever, the last hour, Elena's hand in mine, the way her fingers had gone slack, the way I had waited, the way I had checked, The way I had done the thing you do to make sure they don't come back. The thing I had promised her I would do if it ever came to that. The promise we had made each other one night 3 weeks earlier, when the news was still pretending to be news. I was sure, I said. I am sure. I was sure when I did it, and I was sure when I put her in the ground. Then it's not her, Marcus said quietly. Then how does it sound exactly like her? Nobody answered. The radio, which had been silent for almost an hour, crackled again. This time it wasn't her voice. It was a man's. Older, careful, with the cadence of someone reading from a script he had written himself. This is a broadcast from St. Vincent's. We are sheltering survivors. We have power. We have medicine. We have food. If you can hear this, please respond on this frequency or come to the south entrance. We have your loved ones. We have records. We have hope. Please, don't be afraid. Then static. Then nothing. We have your loved ones, Marcus repeated. What does that mean? It means it's a trap, Caleb said. Nobody talks like that. Nobody says we have your loved ones unless they're trying to make you come. Or it means they have records, I said. Hospital records, patient lists, personal effects. Maybe they found her purse. Maybe they have her phone. Maybe they're playing recordings off her phone because that's what they have. Caleb looked up sharply. Did her phone have voice memos? Yes, she used it for grocery lists. She talked to herself. She said my name on it 100 times. Caleb sat down. He looked almost relieved, which I hated him for in that moment, even though I understood. A monstrous explanation was still better than no explanation. That's it then, Marcus said. They've got phones. They're scrolling through voice memos. They're stitching together names. It's a lure. I didn't say what I was thinking. I didn't say, then why did it sound like she was crying? I didn't say, she didn't cry on grocery lists. I didn't say, the voice on the radio said please. And she never said please on a voice memo. She said things like, don't forget the cilantro, you idiot. I didn't say any of it because saying it would have meant admitting that part of me had already decided to go. That night, Imani had a nightmare. I heard her through the wall. We had all stayed at Caleb's because nobody wanted to be alone after what we'd heard. Marcus was on the couch. Imani was in the spare room. I was in Caleb's armchair, half awake, half not. Caleb was in the back with his radios, scanning, waiting for the voice to come back. She cried out once, and then she was quiet. And then I heard Marcus's heavy footsteps go to her. And his voice low and steady, the way fathers' voices are supposed to be. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. I had heard my own father do the same thing when I was her age. And I had told myself, sitting in that armchair, that someday I would do the same thing for my own child. The ultrasound had been on Tuesday. We had been 12 weeks. We had been about to find out if it was a boy or a girl. I hadn't told anyone. Not Marcus, not Caleb. Elena and I hadn't even told her mother yet, because Elena had wanted to wait until after the second ultrasound to be sure. So when I buried her, I buried 2 people, and only one of them had a name, and the other one had been the size of a lime, and I had not been able to make myself dig the hole any deeper than I dug it, because I couldn't bear the math. I am telling you this now, because it matters for what came next. It matters because when the voice on the radio said, please, what I heard underneath it wasn't just Elena. It was the question I hadn't let myself ask, the question of whether the thing I'd been sure about was actually a thing I had been sure about, or a thing I'd needed to be sure about so I could do what had to be done. Around 3 in the morning, Caleb came out of the back room. He sat down on the ottoman across from me. He looked like he hadn't blinked in a week. "It came back on," he said. "5 minutes ago. It wasn't her this time. It was a kid, a little boy, saying Daddy. Imani's father is here." "I know. That's how I know it's not real." The kid said Daddy, and then he said a name. And the name wasn't anyone in this house. But it was a name I knew. He looked at me. It was my brother's name. My nephew died 8 months ago, before the outbreak. He drowned at a swim meet. His name was Eli. The voice on the radio just said, "Daddy, where are you? It's Eli." I didn't know what to say. I tried anyway. "Your brother isn't here. He can't hear it." "I know. They're not broadcasting to him. They're broadcasting to me. They want me to come, just like they want you to come." "How would they know about your nephew?" "I don't know. Social media, maybe. Obituaries, records. They're not pulling these names out of the air. They have data. They have something. Maybe they have a building full of phones. Maybe they have a server. Or maybe they have him." He looked at me for a long time. He looked like a man being asked to choose between 2 doors he knew would both kill him. "Henry," he said, "don't. Please don't say it out loud. If you say it out loud, I'll start believing it." We sat in the dark for a long time after that. Outside, somewhere down the road, I heard the slow, steady sound of feet on pavement. A lot of feet. Moving west, toward the river, toward the hospital, toward whatever was using our dead to speak. I dug Elena up on the 7th day. I want to tell you I agonized over it. I want to tell you I prayed. I want to tell you that I went out there with the shovel in my hands. And I stood over the dirt for an hour, wrestling with the thing inside me that knew better. But the truth is, I went out at dawn while Marcus was on watch at the other end of the loop. And Caleb was asleep with headphones on, and Imani was drawing flowers on a piece of cardboard. The truth is, I had decided in the night, sometime between hearing about Caleb's nephew and watching the sky turn gray through the window, that I needed to know. The dirt was easier the second time. I'd known it would be. I had only buried her 4 feet down because I had been exhausted and afraid, and the ground had been hard. And now the hardness was working against me in reverse. I went down through the soil quickly. I hit the blanket I'd wrapped her in within 20 minutes. I don't want to describe what I saw when I pulled the blanket back. I'll say only that it was her. It was unmistakably her. The dead don't go missing from their graves in the literal sense, not in the world I live in. Whatever was on the radio, it was not because Elena had clawed her way up and through 4 feet of dirt and walked to the hospital. She was where I had put her. She was as I had left her. The thing I had done to make sure was still done. I sat in the dirt next to her for a long time. I apologized to her out loud. I apologized for digging her up. I apologized for needing proof. I apologized for the child she had been carrying, and for the appointment we had missed, and for the courthouse wedding, and for every small thing I had ever taken for granted. The smell of her shampoo, the way she hummed without knowing it, the way she always took the last bite of my food and pretended she hadn't. Then I covered her back up. I did it slower this time. I did it the way you should do it the first time, if you have the strength, which I hadn't. When I was finished, I went into the house and I washed my hands and my face, and I changed my shirt. I put the dirty clothes in a garbage bag, and I tied the bag, and I put it in the garage. I made coffee. I drank 1 cup, not 2. I sat at the kitchen table, and I made a decision. I was going to the hospital. Not because I believed it was her. I had just confirmed that it wasn't. I was going because someone somewhere, had her voice, had her words, had something of hers, recorded or remembered or stolen. And they were using it to call me. And whoever they were, they had Caleb's nephew too. And probably other people's other people. And that meant they were a system. And a system that knew that much about us was a system that was hunting us. And a system that was hunting us was a system that would eventually come for the rest of us, including a man my age who lived 3 doors down, and his 8-year-old daughter who liked to draw flowers. I didn't tell Marcus, not yet. I needed to know more before I told him, because if I told him without information, he would either come with me, which would put Imani at risk, or he would stop me, which would put everyone at risk eventually anyway. I told Caleb instead. I told him at noon when he came out of his radio room with the look of a man who had been listening to ghosts for too long. I told him I needed his help mapping the route to St. Vincent's. I told him I needed to know what frequencies they were broadcasting on, what their signal strength suggested about their location, whether they were really at the hospital or somewhere nearby pretending to be. He listened. He didn't try to talk me out of it. That should have been my first warning. When I was done, he said, "I'm coming with you." "You can't. Marcus needs to stay with his daughter. I'm coming with you, because if I don't come with you, I'm going to go anyway. Alone. Tomorrow. And I'd rather we go together." I looked at him. He had not slept. He had not really slept in days. He had the look of a man who had decided that the voice of a drowned 8-year-old boy was worth more to him than his own continuing life. "Okay," I said, "tomorrow at first light." Tomorrow at first light. We shook on it like men in an old movie. It felt absurd. It felt necessary. Marcus knew. Of course he knew. He came over that evening with a bottle of bourbon he had been saving and 2 glasses. He sat down at my kitchen table without asking, and he poured for both of us, and he pushed 1 glass across the wood, and he said, "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the radio. You dug her up this morning. You saw. I saw the dirt on your boots when I passed your driveway. I didn't say anything because I figured you needed me not to." I drank the bourbon. It was good. Better than I deserved. "I'm going to the hospital," I said. "I know. Caleb's coming with me." "I know. You can't come." "I know that too." We sat there for a while. Outside the kitchen window, the dogwood was dropping its last leaves. I had a strange thought, that the tree didn't know anything had changed, that for the dogwood it was just another autumn, and that there was something obscene about that, and also something kind. "If you don't come back," Marcus said, "I'll dig her up again. I'll bury you next to her. I'll put your name on something. Use the cutting board. She liked that cutting board. The wooden one. The one with the handle. She picked it out at a flea market in Asheville." He nodded. He was writing it down somewhere behind his eyes. "Imani made you something," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of cardboard. I opened it. It was a drawing of a house with 3 stick figures in front of it. Marcus, Imani, and me. She had drawn me taller than Marcus, which was wrong, and she had given me a beard, which was right. Underneath she had written, in the careful capital letters of an 8-year-old, "Come back, Mr. Henry." I had to put it on the table and look out the window for a minute. "She's a good kid," I said. "She's the only reason I'm still here. You know that." "I know." "If you don't come back, I have to teach her things, Henry. I have to teach her things I never wanted to teach a child. So please, come back. Make me not have to teach her some of them." I told him I would try. It was not a promise. He didn't ask for a promise. We had stopped being men who made promises, both of us, somewhere in the last 7 days. Before he left, he asked me one more thing. What if it really is her, Henry? What if you get there and somehow, by some impossible thing, it really is her? It isn't. Yeah. But what if? I thought about it. I had thought about it 100 times already. I knew the answer. Then I bring her home. And then I do what I did before. And then I bury her again. And this time, I dig the hole 6 feet down, the way you're supposed to, and I write her name on something that lasts. He looked at me for a long time. Then he picked up the bottle, and he poured one more for each of us. And he raised his glass, and he said her name out loud. And I raised mine, and I said it too. And we drank. That was the closest thing to a funeral she ever got. I'm still grateful to him for it. We left at 5 in the morning. Caleb had spent the night plotting the route. The hospital was 4 miles away, on the other side of the river, in a part of town that had been industrial before they renovated it into shops and cafes and a small medical campus. The river was the problem. There were 3 bridges. 2 had been on the news before the news stopped, as choke points where the dead had massed. The 3rd was a pedestrian footbridge that connected the old mill district to the hospital parking lot. Caleb thought the footbridge was our best chance, because it was narrow enough that we could see anything coming from either side, and because the dead, in his experience, didn't like narrow places where they had to walk single file. He had also, in the night, picked up more transmissions. The man's voice again, repeating the invitation to St. Vincent's. A woman this time too, saying she was a nurse, saying they had power and clean water and could treat wounds. And twice, Elena's voice, once saying my name, once saying she was scared. I had decided, sitting at my kitchen table at 4 in the morning, that I would not let her voice work on me anymore. I had buried her twice now. I had seen the proof of her with my own eyes. Whatever was using her was using her. And the way to honor what she had actually been was to walk toward the thing that had stolen her and put a stop to it. We packed light, water, 2 days of food, the pistol Marcus had given me with the 2 spare magazines he had insisted I take. A short crowbar for Caleb, who said he was not a gun person and would prefer to die holding something he understood. A length of rope, a first aid kit, 2 flashlights, 1 handheld radio, tuned to the frequency Marcus would be monitoring from his upstairs window. Imani was awake when we left. She was supposed to be sleeping. She came out onto Marcus's porch in her pajamas and bare feet, and she held out the plastic horse, the one she had been using during her dignified pasture rights conversation. "Take her," she said. "She's brave." I knelt down. I took the horse. "What's her name?" "Pepper. She bites if you're not nice." "I'll be nice." "And Mr. Caleb?" She turned to him. She held out the plastic cow. Caleb knelt down too. He took the cow. I watched his face do something complicated. He put the cow in the inside pocket of his jacket, near his chest, where you would put a wallet. "Thank you," he said. "What's her name?" His name is Norman." "Norman?" "Yes, he's calm." "I could use calm." She nodded gravely. Then she went back inside, and Marcus closed the door behind her, and Marcus and I looked at each other, and nothing else needed to be said. We walked out of Ridgewood Estates, with the sky still mostly dark, and the plastic horse in my jacket pocket, and the plastic cow in Caleb's. And that is how we went to find out who had been speaking with my dead wife's voice. The first mile was the easiest. The neighborhood streets were empty in a way that no longer surprised us. We passed houses with doors hanging open, houses with curtains drawn, houses with chalk marks on the doors that we had not made and didn't know how to read. One house had a sheet hanging from a second-story window with the word "Alive" written on it in spray paint. And underneath that, in a different color, the word "Lied." We didn't stop. We saw our first walker at the corner of Hawthorne and 6th. He was sitting. That was the strange thing. He was sitting on the curb with his hands in his lap, like a man waiting for a bus. He didn't get up when we approached. He turned his head slowly to track us, and his jaw worked like he was chewing on a word he couldn't quite find, but he didn't rise. Caleb gripped my arm, and we crossed to the other side of the street, and we kept walking, and the sitting man watched us go. "They don't do that," Caleb whispered. "They don't sit. They don't wait." This one did. Yeah, this one did. We walked faster after that. Not running. Running attracted them, we had learned. But faster. The second mile was the river district. Brick warehouses converted into lofts no one had moved into yet. A pour-over coffee place with a hand-lettered sign in the window. A bookstore where Elena had once dragged me to a poetry reading I had pretended to enjoy. The bookstore window was broken. The poetry was still inside, presumably. The poets were not. We saw more walkers here, but they were behaving the way walkers were supposed to behave. Wandering, bumping into things. One in the middle of an intersection turning in slow circles like a wind-up toy with a stuck gear. We avoided them easily. The morning was cold, and there was fog coming off the river, and we moved through it like men who had decided not to think about what we were moving through. The footbridge was where Caleb had said it would be. It was older than I remembered, an iron truss thing painted green a long time ago, and now mostly rust. It crossed the river in one long span, with a railing on each side and just enough width for two people to walk abreast. On the far end, I could see the back of the hospital. 4 stories of brown brick with a helipad on the roof and a tall radio antenna that I had never noticed before because I had never had a reason to notice radio antennas. "That's a lot of antenna," Caleb said. "For a hospital. For any hospital. That's a serious rig. They could reach across the state with that. They could reach further." We stopped at the base of the bridge. I looked at the far end. There was no one. No walkers, no survivors. Just an empty bridge and an empty parking lot and a hospital with too much antenna on top of it. "This is the part," I said, "where I'm supposed to feel afraid." "You don't?" "I do, but not the way I expected." We walked onto the bridge. The wood was wet from the fog. Our footsteps were louder than I wanted them to be. Halfway across, Caleb stopped. He took out the handheld radio, the small one, and he turned it on, and he held it up like he was checking for a signal. "What are you doing?" "Listening. I want to know if they're broadcasting from inside or outside." The radio hissed. Then, very clearly, the man's voice. The careful one, the script reader. "This is a broadcast from St. Vincent's. We see you on the bridge. Please proceed to the south entrance. We are waiting for you. We have your loved ones." Caleb and I looked at each other. "They have cameras," he said, "or someone in a window. Or both." We kept walking. There was no point in turning back. Turning back meant whatever was on the other side would come and find us, eventually, and probably with company. The only way through was through. When we reached the far end of the bridge, a door at the back of the hospital opened. A man stepped out. He was wearing scrubs. He was clean. His hair was combed. He looked, more than anything else, like a man at work. He raised a hand. "Mr. Hale," he called. "Mr. Hernandez, welcome." We've been expecting you." I had not told the radio my last name. Caleb had not told it his. Neither of us had spoken into a transmitter in our lives, as far as the man in scrubs could have known. But he knew our names anyway, and that was the moment I understood that we had not walked into a trap. We had walked into a place that had stopped needing traps. We had walked into a place that already knew who we were. His name was Dr. Aaron Pell. He told us this immediately, with the practiced warmth of a man who had introduced himself for a living. He shook our hands. His hand was dry and cold, and his grip was exactly the right amount of firm. He led us through the door he had come from, into a service corridor, and from there into a stairwell, and from there up 2 flights to what had once been the 3rd-floor administrative offices. The lights were on. The actual lights, electric, humming. Caleb made a small sound in his throat when he saw them. Power, in our world, had become the rarest thing. "We have a generator, Doctor," Pell said, anticipating the question. "Diesel, substantial reserves. We can run essential systems for another 6 months at our current load, longer if we ration." "That's a lot of diesel," I said. This was a regional disaster preparedness site. We were stocked for a hurricane. Then we were stocked for something else. He led us into a conference room. There was coffee on a sideboard, real coffee, the smell of it hitting me like a physical thing. There was a plate of crackers. There were 3 chairs at a table. He gestured for us to sit. We didn't. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you came because of your wife's voice. Mr. Hernandez, you came because of your nephews. I want to address that directly, before anything else, because I owe you both honesty." He sat down. He folded his hands on the table. "We did not have your wife, Mr. Hale. We do not have your nephew, Mr. Hernandez. We have never had them." The room got quiet in a particular way. "Then how?" Caleb started. "Phones, hard drives, cloud backups. When the outbreak began, this hospital became a coordination center for emergency services across 3 counties. We received the personal effects of every patient who came through these doors and never left. We received the phones of first responders who didn't come back. We received, eventually, the contents of a regional data center about half a mile from here that one of our staff was clever enough to retrieve before the power grid failed. We have, in this building, the digital lives of approximately 200,000 people, including Mr. Hale, your wife's cloud backup, which was attached to her phone, which was on her person when she was admitted to an urgent care clinic on the morning of the 2nd day of the outbreak. I had not known she had gone to an urgent care clinic. She had told me she was going to the pharmacy. "She didn't come here," he said gently, anticipating again. "She was sent home from urgent care with a prescription. We have the record. We have the prescription. We have the voicemail she left her mother that afternoon saying she was fine. We have the voice memos she made on the drive home, which were many. Your wife talked to herself a great deal, Mr. Hale." "She did," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "We've been broadcasting voices because broadcasting voices works. We have found 73 survivors this way in the past 3 weeks. 73 people who would not have come for a stranger asking them to come, but who came for their mother, their brother, their daughter, their wife. We don't have those people, but we have something of them, and it has been enough." Caleb sat down. I didn't yet. "You're using the dead as bait," I said. "We're using their recordings to save the living." "Yes, I won't soften it. It is exactly that. And once we're here, once you're here, you have a choice. You can stay. We have housing, food, medicine, and work for anyone willing. We are trying, Mr. Hale, to build something. Or you can leave. We will not stop you. We will give you supplies for the road. We do not believe in keeping people who do not want to be kept. And the people in our houses, Marcus, Imani, bring them. Anyone you bring is welcome. We are not desperate enough to take them by force. We are desperate enough to use a dead woman's voice to get her husband to walk across a bridge, but not desperate enough to drag a child out of her father's house. I sat down then. My legs decided again, without consulting me. There was a long silence. Dr. Pell waited. He was good at waiting. I suspect he had practiced. "Why us?" Caleb finally said. "Out of 200,000, why our names?" "Proximity. We've been broadcasting to your area for 9 days. We have signal strength data. We knew people in your neighborhood were listening. We didn't know who specifically. We started with names we thought were likely. We threw out a net. You walked into it. Other people in our neighborhood are listening to voices too. Possibly. Probably. We have broadcast a great many names in your direction. Some have come, some have not. Some, we suspect, were already dead and could not come. Some heard the voice of someone they had loved, and they decided to stay where they were because they could not bear to find out it wasn't real. I thought about Marcus. I thought about whether his wife's voice had been broadcast too, in those 9 days, and whether he had heard it and not told me. I thought about all the things people don't tell each other, even at the end of the world. "I want to see the room," I said. "The broadcast room?" "The room where you do it, where you play her voice. I want to see it." Dr. Pell nodded. He stood up. "Of course," he said. "I think you should." The broadcast room was on the 2nd floor, in what had been a billing office. They had taken out the cubicles and put in a long table with 3 computer monitors, 2 transmitters, a mixing board, and a wall of small speakers, each one labeled with a name in marker. I read the names as we walked in. Elena Hale, Eli Hernandez, Robert Choi, Maria Delgado, Alicia Brown, Tommy Brown. 18 names, 18 voices, ready to be played at the press of a button. There was a woman at the table. She was wearing headphones. She turned around when we came in, slid the headphones off, and stood up. She was maybe 40, tired in the way everyone was tired now, but cleaner than most. "Mr. Hale," she said. She did not offer her hand. "I'm Dr. Mira Okafor. I run the broadcasts. I want to apologize to you in person. I owe you that." "You don't owe me an apology. You owe my wife one. But she's not here, so I guess you'll have to give it to me." She accepted that. She didn't flinch. "I sat in this room for 6 hours yesterday, playing your wife's voice into a microphone. I want you to know that I listened to every memo on her phone before I chose which lines to use. I listened to her sing in the car. I listened to her argue with herself about whether to call her mother. I listened to her say your name 204 times in the course of a year. I want you to know that I learned her, Mr. Hale, before I used her. I don't know if that matters. I think it should matter, even if it doesn't help." I looked at the speaker with Elena's name on it. I looked at the computer screen, where a waveform was paused mid-syllable. "Play it," I said. "Whatever you were going to play, play it now." Dr. Okafor looked at Dr. Pell. He nodded once. She turned around. She clicked the mouse. Elena's voice came through the speaker. She said, "Henry, I'm sorry. I should have told you. I should have told you a lot of things. I'm sorry." It was assembled. I could hear it now, knowing what I knew. "Henry from one recording, I'm sorry from another. I should have told you from a third, the words sliced and restitched, the breath patterns just slightly off, the room tone shifting between syllables in a way you would never notice if you weren't listening for it. It was not her. It had never been her. And yet, knowing that, I still cried, because the words she said were words she might have said, words she had perhaps wanted to say, words I would never know whether she had wanted to say because she had not had time to say them. Caleb had sat down on the floor at some point. He was holding the plastic cow Imani had given him. Norman, calm. He was crying quietly into Norman's plastic head. Dr. Pell said nothing. Dr. Okafor said nothing. They were giving us the room. After a while, I said, I want you to delete it. Mr. Hale, all of it, her voice, her memos, everything you have of her. I want you to delete it. I want her to stop being a thing you can play. Dr. Pell hesitated. It has saved lives. It has been used. I understand that it has been useful. But she didn't consent to it. She is dead, and she did not consent. And I am her husband, and I am alive. And I am telling you that I do not consent on her behalf. Delete it. He looked at Dr. Okafor. Dr. Okafor looked at me. She nodded slowly. I can do that, she said. I will do that, today. In front of me. Yes, in front of you. She did. She sat at the computer and she opened the folder labeled with my wife's name, and she selected the contents and she deleted them. And she emptied the recycle bin. And she opened the backup drive and she did it again. And she did the same on a second backup drive in a fireproof safe under the table. When she was done, she turned to me. It's gone, she said. Thank you. I'm sorry. I know. I turned to Caleb. He looked up at me with red eyes. Do you want them to keep Eli? I asked. He thought about it. He thought about it for a long time. Keep him, he finally said. Use him. If it brings people home. Keep him. He would have wanted that. He was that kind of kid. Dr. Okafor nodded. She wrote something down. We left the broadcast room and Dr. Pell took us downstairs. And on the way down, I asked him the question I had been holding since we walked in. What about the ones who come and find out it isn't real? What do they do? Most stay, he said. A few leave. A very few. 2 have killed themselves on the premises in the last 3 weeks. We have a counselor. She is overworked. And you keep doing it. Yes, because for every 2 who can't bear it, there are 71 who can. And 71 people alive in a world like this one is not a number I am willing to give up. I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't. I have turned it over in my head 100 times since, and I still don't. We stayed at the hospital for 2 days. I did not intend to. I had planned to walk back across the bridge that afternoon. But Caleb collapsed on the stairwell on the way down from the broadcast room, just folded up like someone had cut his strings. And when they got him to a bed and took his vitals, they told me he was severely dehydrated and running on nothing, and that he needed at minimum 24 hours of fluids and rest. I sat with him in a small room on the 4th floor that had a window facing east. And I watched the sun come up the next morning over a city that no longer had any other lights in it but the ones we were sitting under. In those 2 days, I learned more about St. Vincent's than I wanted to know. There were 143 people living there. 31 of them had been staff before the outbreak and had simply never left. The rest were survivors who had been brought in by the broadcasts, by foot traffic, by patrols. They had a doctor for actual medicine, a doctor for psychiatry, a chaplain who said he had stopped believing in God on the 3rd day and started again on the 17th, and was not sure where he was now. They had children, 11 of them, They had a teacher. They had also, I learned, lost 22 people in the first month. Some to bites, some to suicide, some to a brief, ugly attempt by an outside group to take the hospital by force. An attempt that had failed because Dr. Pell, it turned out, had been a captain in the Army Reserve before he'd been a doctor, and had not forgotten everything he'd learned. He told me this matter-of-factly, the way he told me everything, with the air of a man who had decided that lying took more energy than he had to spare. On the second night, I asked him the other question I had been holding. If we come back, Marcus, Imani, me, Caleb if he wants, what's the catch? There is no catch. There's always a catch. He considered this. The catch is that you would be giving up the right to make decisions alone. We make decisions as a group here, within reason. You would have to abide by the rules of the group. You would have to take a shift. You would have to share what you brought with you. You would have to trust people you don't know, which is the hardest thing any of us is asked to do anymore. What if I can't? Then you don't come, or you come and you leave. What if I come and I bring Imani, and then I leave and take her with me? He looked at me carefully. Marcus is her father. That would be his decision, not yours. Right, I know. I'm asking hypothetically. Hypothetically, I would let you go. We are not in the business of keeping anyone. We are in the business of offering somewhere to be. I nodded. I went back to Caleb's room. He was awake. He had eaten something. He looked less like a man on the edge of disappearing. I've been thinking, he said, about staying. Yeah. You should. You won't? I don't think so. Not yet. Maybe later. I need to go back. For Marcus. For Marcus. For her grave. For... I didn't finish. I didn't need to. You're going to ask me to tell him things if you don't come back, he said. Yes. Tell me what to tell him. I sat down. I thought about it for a while. Tell him I came, I said. Tell him I saw what they had. Tell him it wasn't her. And I knew it. But I needed to see it to know it. Tell him I made them delete her. Tell him I asked them to keep your nephew because you said so. And I thought that was the kind of choice a person should get to make for themselves. Tell him this place is real, that they have power and food and people, that I think it's the closest thing to a future any of us has been offered in a month. Tell him I'm not ready to come back here yet, but I might be, later if he wants to. Tell him Imani drew me as taller than him in her picture, and that I have decided to be honored by this and not corrected by it. Caleb almost smiled. And if I die on the way home and don't get back to him at all, I said, tell him I tried, and tell him it wasn't his fault for not coming with me. Tell Imani that Pepper was brave the whole way. Don't tell her any of the other parts. Henry. Yeah. You're going to make it home. Maybe. Probably. I just want to be sure someone says the things if I don't. He nodded. He understood. He had nephew-shaped reasons for understanding. The next morning, I left him at the hospital. He stood on the loading dock with Dr. Pell and Dr. Okafor and a few others. And he raised the plastic cow at me in farewell. And I raised the plastic horse back at him. And then I walked across the bridge alone. The walk back was harder than the walk out. I don't fully understand why. I had a route. I had supplies. I had spent 2 nights sleeping in a real bed, eating real food, drinking real coffee. I should have been stronger. Instead, I felt like something inside me had been emptied and then refilled with something heavier. I kept stopping. Once in the middle of the bridge to look down at the river, which was moving the way rivers move, indifferent. Once at the corner of Hawthorne and 6th, where the sitting walker was no longer sitting, was no longer there at all. And the absence of him bothered me more than his presence had. I saw 3 more walkers on the way home. One I avoided, one I went around. One I had to put down with a pistol because it had wedged itself between a car and a fence, in such a way that walking past it without doing something felt like a small private cowardice I did not want to live with. The pistol was louder than I remembered. The sound of it carried. I was within a quarter mile of Ridgewood Estates when I heard the rifle. It was Marcus's. I knew the sound because he had fired it once, on the 3rd day, to drop a walker that had gotten too close to Imani's bedroom window. It was a sharper crack than mine, more honest somehow. I started running. I am not a runner. I ran anyway. There were 3 of them in the cul-de-sac. Walkers. They had come up from the south, from a part of the loop I had not approached on the way out. Marcus was on the porch of his house with a rifle. He had already dropped 2. The 3rd was close enough that the rifle was almost too long for the angle. I came around the corner, and I shot it from behind. And Marcus turned with his rifle still up and almost shot me. And then he lowered the rifle, and we both stood there breathing. Imani came out of the front door. She had her hands over her ears. When she saw me, she dropped them. Mr. Henry. Hi, kid. You came back. I told you I'd try. She ran across the lawn, and she hit me at the waist with the full force of an 8-year-old who had spent 2 days trying not to cry. And I dropped down, and I held her. And Marcus came down off the porch, and he looked at me with everything he was not going to say written across his face. And I gave him the small nod that meant I would tell him everything later, in the kitchen with the bourbon, the way we did things. Inside the house, I gave Imani back the plastic horse. Pepper, brave the whole way. Mr. Caleb? She said. Mr. Caleb stayed at the hospital. He's safe. Norman is with him. He said Norman was very calm. Is he coming back? Maybe later. He might. Or we might go to him. She thought about that. She nodded. That night after Imani was asleep, Marcus and I sat at my kitchen table, and I told him everything. I told him about the cameras and the antenna, and Dr. Pell and Dr. Okafor and the conference room, and the speaker with Elena's name on it, and the waveform paused mid-syllable. I told him about deleting her. I told him about Caleb keeping his nephew. I told him about the 143 people and the 11 children and the teacher. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I want to go. Okay. Not tomorrow. Soon. I want Imani to be around a teacher. I want her to be around other kids. I want her to be somewhere she can be 8, even now. I think that's right. You'll come. I thought about Elena's grave behind the tool shed. I thought about the dogwood. I thought about the kitchen, where I'd drunk 2 cups of coffee for a wife who was no longer there. I thought about the fact that staying in this house was not loyalty to her. She had not asked to be loyal to a house. She had asked, when she had asked anything, to be remembered. And remembering her did not require the 4 walls she had happened to die inside. Yes, I said. I'll come. But I want to do one thing first. What? I want to move her. I want to take her with us. Not all of her. Something. I want to put her somewhere with a name on it. I want her to have a name on something. Marcus thought about this. He said, I can help you do that whenever you want. Tomorrow, if you want. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. We sat in the kitchen for a while longer. The bourbon was almost gone. Outside, the dogwood was just a shape against the dark. Somewhere down the road, a walker was making the sound walkers made and it was no longer the worst sound I had heard that month. Marcus reached across the table, and he put his hand on my arm, and he left it there for a moment, the way men do when they cannot say a thing, but want the other man to know they have not said it. Then he went home to his daughter, and I sat in my kitchen alone, and I listened to the silence of a house that I had decided to leave, and I thought, she would have liked them. She would have liked the teacher. She would have liked Dr. Okafor, even after. She would have argued with Dr. Pell about something on the second day, and decided she liked him on the third. She would have wanted me to go, so I was going. We left Ridgewood Estates on a Sunday. Marcus drove the truck. Imani sat between us with Pepper in her lap. In the bed of the truck, wrapped in the blanket I had wrapped her in the first time, was what I had been able to bring of Elena. We had dug carefully. We had taken only what I needed to take. The rest I had covered again, and I had planted the wooden cutting board over her, the one from the flea market in Asheville. And I had carved her name into it with a kitchen knife, and the patience I had not had the first time. Elena Vasquez Hale. Beloved. The dates. A small star, because she had liked stars. At the hospital, they gave her a place in the small garden behind the chapel, where the other names were. Caleb was there. He had cut his hair. He looked like a man who was being kept alive by the act of being useful to other people, which is one of the better reasons I know of to be kept alive. I do not know if we will live through the next month. I do not know if St. Vincent's will hold, or if the broadcasts will keep finding people, or if the dead will eventually learn to sit down for reasons other than waiting. I know only this. I buried my wife twice. I heard her voice on the radio, and I walked 4 miles toward it, knowing it wasn't her, because part of me needed the world to give me back a thing it had taken, and the world, in its terrible, patient way, gave me something else instead. It gave me people. It gave me a child who drew me taller than I am. It gave me a man with a rifle and a bottle, and a man with a plastic cow named Norman, and a doctor who learned my wife before she used her, and a garden behind a chapel where her name is on a piece of wood I carved myself. I am still her husband. I will be, I think, for as long as I am anything.